بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وآله وأصحابه ومن والاه. اللهم افتح مسامع قلوبنا لذكرك. Ya Allah, please open the hearing channel of our hearts to that which reminds us of you. ربي زدنا علما ولا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا. Ya Allah, please increase us in knowledge and don't let our hearts deviate from truth and guidance after you have shown them to us and envelop us in your merciful love. Tonight I had few topics to share with you, and I was all along since a week pondering which one would be more appropriate, at least for tonight. So I decided to pick one of those in my mind. We can still change in the middle. Namely, I'm not going to tell you what the title is of the topic as I go along. Inshallah ta'ala, I hope the benefit of that will become apparent, I hope, to all of you, or at least to some of you, depending on what you need and depending on your level of awareness and on the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, most importantly. Now, let me start with a question. This is going to be a matter of, in a sense, the rationale and the logic of Sharia, of Fiqh, of Usul al-Fiqh, etc. That have to do with some issues that sometimes have become popular amongst some circles of Muslims. And I believe in that there has been a lot of misconception, a lot of impropriety, a lot of, I think, lack of, wallahu ta'ala alam, of rational, scholarly, Islamic scholarly accuracy. And some have been used to some of the logic of others and have taken that for granted without having had the opportunity to look in more depth at those questions. Am I clear? No. Let's keep that as is for now. So, let me ask you a question which I asked before. What is the source of our knowledge as Muslims? Al-Qur'an and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And that's it. Khalas? I'm asking a question. So we're learning together. So Qur'an and Sunnah, and that's it, correct? No, why not? There are other sources. Okay. What is that? Okay. Well, I think you have the idea, you remember the idea, but you're not accurate enough in mentioning it specifically. But here again, it is very simple yet very important. To say our source of knowledge, the Qur'an and the Sunnah, is a true statement. But to indicate by that only the Qur'an and the Sunnah and nothing else, that's very, very wrong. And that's what many people, many young students, some students of ilm even, at some level, sometimes it depends on how they learned and where they learned, come out believing and thinking that if there is an issue, if it is not in the Quran and in the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, therefore it does not exist, and whoever talks about it has no stand and has no value. And this is not in the ilm of Sharia. As we have elaborated before to some degree, and this is a sort of a reminder to some of you at least, and perhaps new to some, is that the sources of Islamic knowledge in general, and Islamic fiqh, jurisprudence, or law in particular, are not only the Quran and the Sunnah. The Quran is the most primary source of all knowledge of Islam, of all ahkam, of all laws, of all fiqh, etc. And the Quran informs us that the Sunnah is a source of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So the two primary sources of our knowledge are the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Sunnah by the very texts of the Quran as well, and the mutawatir Sunnah, and the overwhelmingly reported words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that have indicated that also, in addition to the Quran saying, also the mutawatir Sunnah tells us that the word, the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is also a primary source of knowledge with or after the Quran. And they teach us, as the ulama rahimahumullah ta'ala, the experts in the fields of the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And each field, each discipline of knowledge has its experts. You have experts in mathematics. You can be a good student of math, but you're not necessarily an expert in mathematics. You can be a very good doctor, physician, but you're not an expert in the science of medicine. Doctor, a physician is like an engineer of the body. So you can have an engineer in electrical engineering, or in mechanical engineering, or in other fields. Good engineer, but that's not necessarily an expert in those fields. وهكذا. In the Quran and the Sunnah, some may have good knowledge, good information, respectable knowledge of understanding, etc. But it doesn't make them necessarily experts in the Quran and in the Sunnah. So the experts in the Quran and in the Sunnah are called in the Arabic language, in the context of the sacred knowledge, in the context of the Sharia, they're called what? Alim is, yes, you can call that alim, but a more specific word for that. مجتهد. مجتهد. مجتهد في الشرع. مجتهد في الفقه. في الشرع in general, مجتهد في الفقه، مجتهد في الأصول، أو مجتهد في هذه كلها، مجتهد في تفسير القرآن، مجتهد في الحديث وأصوله، أو مجتهد في الفقه بصفة عامة، or مجتهد in jurisprudence in general, for example. Now, these are scholars, expert scholars, the expert scholars, mujtahidun, who have always and primarily always dealt with the main sources of the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and derived from them not only injunctions and rulings and verdicts about specific issues, but their ability to derive from those axioms and principles and methodologies by which to analyze and to understand the way of Islam in general and the Sharia in particular. Those experts have also told us, and we have studied, and those who have studied that would know that besides the Quran and the Sunnah, these experts of the mind and some of them of the soul, these very high IQ experts, and these very high SQ at the same time. What do I mean by SQ? Spiritual quotient. IQ being the intelligence quotient. Now we invent a word of our own, we call it SQ. That's spiritual quotient. Because sometimes head is not good enough. It can be very intelligent but very corrupt. And therefore you can give fatawi that are very corrupt. So it needs a high IQ and a high SQ. These are the mujtahidun, the experts. Rahimahumullah ta'ala. And we are informed, alhamdulillah, through their analyses of the Qur'an and the Sunnah, and from them we have learned, like you learn mathematics from the experts of math throughout the history, like you learn chemistry from the experts of chemistry, like you learn language from the experts of language, and the rules of each discipline, you learn them from these experts. And you use them to also maybe one day become an expert. They have informed us, and we have learned that the other secondary sources to the primary sources of Sharia, of knowledge, of what is right and wrong in fiqh and so on, and this is the realm of Usul al-Fiqh, that there is ijma'. You have heard of this concept, ijma', the consensus. And there's a lot to be said. Volumes are written about this. And then in modern times there are doctoral dissertations about ijma' or some aspects of ijma', etc. The consensus and how it is defined and how it operates and when it is operative and what are the differences amongst the scholars about the details of ijma' and so on and so forth. The point is simply ijma' is a source of our Islamic knowledge. And there is qiyas also, which some of you mentioned. Qiyas, loosely translated as the way to reason by analogy. Reasoning by analogy. And again, there are doctoral dissertations written about qiyas itself, and there are volumes and volumes about what qiyas is and the different aspects of qiyas, and etc. The point is, this is a source also of knowledge for the experts to extract laws and verdicts from the Qur'an and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As the Qur'an and Sunnah taught, they extract laws through, for example, qiyas, not in the book, not in the Sunnah, for example, of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam necessarily. And then you have also other sources, other adillatul lil ahkam, or guides to show us what the verdict is. We call them maybe sources, adillatul ahkam. So you have, for example, al-istihsan, which is somehow closely related to qiyas. Al-istihsan, sometimes they call it, some translate it as juristic preference. Juristic preference, al-istihsan. And it has rules and standards and logic behind it, and why it is to be taken also as an indicator of what Allah wills from us, not in the Qur'an, not in the Sunnah, not through ijma', not through qiyas. For example, the argument or the reasoning through istihsan, the reasoning through sadd al-dhara'i', or blocking of the means, an argument made through the concept of blocking of the means. That is something simple. If we know that this way most probably would lead to something that is harmful or forbidden by the Shara' for reasons A, B, C, D, if we know that this path will lead to that, then we should block that path. The argument of sadd al-dhara'i, blocking the means to that which would lead to something that is, for example, harmful at so many levels, again, that we need to know. Some say blocking the means versus opening the means. Also, we open the means for something that is good and beneficial and sanctioned in principle at least, by the Shara'. So we should open the way to it. That's reasoning by al-dhara'i also. And on. And we have al-Masalih al-Mursalah, the reasoning by al-Masalih al-Mursalah. That is, that in general, there is a concept that the Shara' in general approves of and favors in general. But a specific issue here is not mentioned neither in the Qur'an, nor in the Sunnah, nor in the Ijmā', etc. But it seems to fall in the genus. You understand the genus, al-jins. In the genus of what is favored and what is liked by the Shara'. But specifically that situation is not mentioned to be halal or haram or mustahab or for example makruh. But the argument of masalih mursala would render that possibly justifiable and recommended. And we have the concept of al-ISTIHSAB, and the concept or the reasoning by istishab, the reasoning by urf, by custom, the reasoning by the opinion of a companion, one companion only. We know that he had this view, he had that hukm on this issue. Even our ulama have gone to the extent of having also mentioned at some level of this sort of hierarchy of sources of law. They have mentioned even SHAR'U man qablana. SHAR'U man qablana. That is the laws of those who came before us with scriptures such as the Jewish scripture, the Christian scriptures, etc. At one point, at one level, this becomes, to many ulama of our early predecessors and salaf, have also argued this issue as being or not being a source of knowledge towards the end of this hierarchy. So to say therefore that what is in the Qur'an we accept and nothing else is dead wrong. To say also what's in the Qur'an and in the Sunnah we accept and anything else, no, that's dead wrong. Because the idea is to say what does not have a Shar'i evidence, that we don't consider seriously. There is no Shar'i evidence. And Shar'i evidence is taken from these sources, not only the Qur'an and the Sunnah, because sometimes we don't find anything in the Qur'an and in the Sunnah explicitly about a specific situation. But we find other means, such as the ones we have mentioned, extracted by the experts from the letter and the spirit of the Qur'an and the Sunnah. Through those other methods and sources, we find an answer to things that are outside in details or in specifics, outside the mention of the Qur'an and in the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this already is very, very, very important. So tell me, Qur'an, Sunnah. If not, I don't accept. That's very foolish. It's very wrong. Very wrong. And yet it has been repeated by so many people. And even people who teach. And people who sit in circles like these. And people who write. It is simply not true. Either they don't know, or they mean something else. But to say this thing is textually in the Quran haram, or textually, explicitly in the Sunnah haram, if that is like that, khalas. We don't look elsewhere. In general. We don't look elsewhere in general. But in specifics, we still need to look elsewhere. Example. Well, if it is in the Quran or in the Sunnah, it says it's haram or halal here. In the Quran and the Sunnah, khalas. When the ulama say that, the experts, when they say that, they know what they mean. But the non-experts understand sometimes very wrong, and then they become very intense about what we think is right. First of all, if there is an ayah in the Quran that indicates as you read it that something is haram, the experts, what they do, unlike some of us, we don't do that. What do the experts do? Before they say the statement about this, in Sharia this is haram, or in Sharia this is obligatory, or in Sharia this is mustahab, or makruh, or mubah. If they look at the Quran, where should they look? Or how should they look? No, first of all, I'm saying very clearly, my question is very clear. By looking at the Quran, how should they look at the Quran? Is it specific or general? You're getting there. So say it in more general terms now. Look at the context. We're getting there. No, be more general than that. No? Well, those are all examples, exactly. All good examples. But then, to summarize all of that, exactly. Look at, in the Quran, how do I look in the Quran about this issue? The experts would have to look, not at, this ayah mentioned it, and it seems it indicates that it is haram. No, those experts, what they do, they have to know all the Quran. And those who know the Quran well and live it and read it and study it and live it, their lives, it's like it's all here. Like you scan something by computer and it scans an entire book in a second. Some ulama experts, they scan the entire Quran in 30 seconds. I mean, when it comes to this issue, it's scanned. And they know whether there is on this issue another ayah or not. And how many and where they are. And then after all of that, what do you think they're going to do? Exactly. That doesn't stop there. Well, maybe in the Sunnah, there are other texts also pertaining to this issue. And here, almost nobody memorizes all the Sunnah. Almost nobody has ever memorized the entire Sunnah. We have miracles amongst our scholars, our predecessors, about the magnitude of the greatness of their capability of memorizing, which is also an indicator of their intelligence. And it's incredible, the numbers of tens of thousands, nay, hundreds of thousands of ahadith that they committed to memory, along with their asanid, along with the chains of narrations. And even those like Imam Ahmad, and before him, after him, Imam al-Bukhari, or Muslim, or before them, like Imam Malik, etc. And many. And even they did not commit all and every sunnah in memory. So the experts, in addition to how much they would memorize, especially the early days, they have also to do, scanning studies and research about what is in the Sunnah. And they look at all of that in the Quran and in the Sunnah with the tools and the instruments of proper logical analysis that includes linguistic analysis. They do use all of that, some of the things you mentioned, and then they come up with an expert opinion based on that system of logical analysis. Remember, with their spiritual beauty. With that system of logical analysis, then they can come with an answer. And they could scan the entire Quran or the Sunnah as available to them, and they find nothing in it that in any explicit way gives an answer to this question. So they use the other methods at which they ought to be experts. Are you with me? Did you understand this well? So if someone comes and says to us, and we are students, hopefully students of knowledge, I hope I am a student of knowledge, and then a person would say, come as a person, an educated person, an engineer, a PhD, a master's degree in some field, including Sharia nowadays, including Sharia fields, and says, from the Quran and the Sunnah, this is right. And recites some text from the Quran and from the Sunnah to us correctly. And then someone else comes and says, on this issue, says, Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, or Al-Imam Malik, or Al-Imam Shafi'i, or Al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, just as examples of experts. Or later on, let's say, like Al-Imam, let's say, Al-Nawawi, Al-Imam Al-Badr Al-Aini, Al-Imam Ibn Lub, I'm picking from each madhab one, Al-Imam Ibn Lub, or Imam Ibn Qudam al-Maqdisi, later on from the four schools, or even later on Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, or Ibn Hajar al-Haythami, or Al-Imam Ibn Abidin, or Al-Imam, for example, Al-Imam in the Maliki madhab, let's pick one of the later ones, rahimahullah ta'ala, Al-Imam Sidi Abdul Rahman al-Fasi. Mention this. Just any one of those versus one who comes as, let's say, one with a degree, and I'm going to be very direct. Degree, PhD, or a master's or bachelor's degree with ijazat in many disciplines, including, if this is, in Shara', and says, Quran and Sunnah mention this on this issue, and this is what is right. And the other one says, he mentions one of those names, let's say, or some of them, one of those names, and says, this is what he said, which happened to be a little different or totally different from that. Now, alhamdulillah, assuming we are serious seekers of the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which way would you feel comfortable with? Any other? Okay. Go ahead. Pardon? Okay. These are two answers. Two different answers. Any other answer? How would you feel? These things happen. These things happen to you. Especially those of you who are using a lot of internet, a lot of websites, a lot of Googles, and a lot of lot of reading of contemporary books, etc., which is all good. Depends, or simply in conversations with fellow, peers who are reading and studying together, and these things might come up. What is your answer? Khalas, Start that again. It's what? I'm sorry. Okay. Now, in this case, you suggest that we should make even clearer what the two persons are mentioning and claiming. Well, this is usually what would happen. From what I said to you at this point, and that's what I asked you for. First of all, did you understand well what I said? I emphasize that you said yes. Alhamdulillah. Then I asked this question. And I have these answers. Khalas, alhamdulillah, these are your answers. My answer to this is the following. And assuming both are reporting accurately. Clear? Assuming both are reporting accurately. The person mentions the ayah, mentions the hadith, and assuming that is accurate. And the person mentions also the source of expert and assume they are accurate. Logically, from what we said, I definitely would feel comfortable with your choice. Why? And you mentioned proper logic for that. Why? Because yes. No, please do. Okay. And remember, I gave names, and I gave names that are basically very well known. Each one of them is an expert. And an expert, a mujtahid by definition, before they opine on any issue, they have already consulted all of those sources. So I mentioned those. They have already consulted all of those sources. Now, logically and rationally, those experts who consulted all of those sources versus myself or yourself or even somebody as I described nowadays, who has also consulted, as he said, the Qur'an and the Sunnah. Then which one is more expert? If that person is an expert, assume that person is an expert. Which is usually nowadays, most of the time, not the case. And by expert I mean mujtahid. I don't mean simply someone who knows well. Alhamdulillah, may Allah reward all. But a mujtahid. So of course, relative to Malik, Al-Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, or to Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, those names I mentioned, or Al-Shafi'i, or Al-Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, or Sufyan bin Uyayna, or Thawri, or later on, those galaxies that I mentioned, they know all of that, and I'm sure a lot more. And I I'm not an expert to go and check which one of the two is more accurate. When you say clear in the Quran and the Sunnah, what is clear? What is clear? If it is clear to you and to me, now, and I'm going to check if it's clear, it was not clear to Abu Hanifa. If that's clear, so if it's clear to me, it means Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala or Malik rahimahullah ta'ala or one of those that I mentioned, they have missed that clarity. I'm just trying to draw your attention to logical, rational thinking as educated peoples. And if there is, of course, a Rawhani maturity, that's even much better. So if someone says, no, I am bringing you the Quran and the Sunnah and you're telling me what Abu Hanifa said, but many people don't know how to answer poor people. No, the answer is those who mention they don't know. They themselves also don't know. The answer, no, I'm not bringing Abu Hanifa here, rahimahullah ta'ala. I'm bringing the fact that you are telling me this is Quran and Sunnah, and I'm bringing to you Abu Hanifa who knows the Quran and the Sunnah. If you want, Ya Sidi, just as you do, which is not true, he must know it a lot more than you do and I do. And with that Quran and Sunnah, we're just quoting his verdict. We're just quoting his verdict, the answer. We're not quoting the reasoning behind it. That sometimes, for some students, they don't learn it until in advanced studies. Sometimes in very advanced studies. And you have our scholars who have written volumes about the sources of the arguments, of the verdicts of the likes of Imam Abu Hanifa or Shafi'i or Kada. For example, the work of Imam Rahimahullah Ta'ala, the Andalusian great jurist, Maliki jurist, Sahib Bidayat al-Mujtahid wa Nihayat al-Muqtasid, Ibn Rushd, that is, Ibn Rushd al-Hafid, the great, faqih and jurist, as well as he was also a scientist, etc. And in his great work, he has the arguments and the reasonings from the sources of law, Quran and Sunnah and otherwise, of the arguments of different expert scholars and different expert schools of thought. So, I'm telling you Quran and Sunnah and you're telling me Abu Hanifa? We should not be intimidated if we know what we're doing. But most of the time, because we don't know, so we contribute to making things worse. No, it's not Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, versus the Quran and Sunnah. No. It is understanding of the Quran and Sunnah of yours versus Abu Hanifa's. That's the difference here. The understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah of your teacher versus Imam Malik, for example, or versus even later, but 7 centuries ago, the likes of Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, or Imam al-Nawawi, or Ibn Lub al-Maliki, or Ibn Qudam al-Maqdisi al-Hanbali, or Ramli al-Shafi'i. No, this is that versus that. Not the Quran and the Sunnah versus that. And many have fallen into this trap argument, which I'm sure those who present it oftentimes themselves are not aware of what the mistake is in their argument. Or if I do that, it's wrong. Moreover, sometimes the text is there. Yes, the text is there, but how is the text understood? With what logic and whose logic? the logic of the likes of those names that I mentioned, or the logic of the likes of those, for example, with all due respect, of at least some of much, much later, like nowadays, when depth of knowledge and of rational knowledge is not as prevalent, and when also spiritual transparency and purity is not as prevalent. And so, surely the analysis of someone like Al-Imam Ahmad or like Al-Imam Abu Hanifa or the others, their analysis weighs a lot heavier than the analysis of someone living nowadays on issues that are old, not on issues that did not exist before at all. That's a different discourse. So, an example. A text teaches, and the text is in accordance to those who agree and disagree about whatever the context of that text. They all agree that this text is authentic. Even that there's a long discourse. And the text teaches لا تشد الرحال إلا إلى ثلاثة مساجد المسجد الحرام والمسجد الأقصى المسجد الحرام والمسجد الأقصى ومسجدي هذا. End of quote. Quoted by Bukhari and Muslim and many others. لا تشد الرحال إلا إلى ثلاثة مساجد المسجد الحرام والمسجد الأقصى ومسجدي هذا. Literally it says, this is a metaphor. لا تشد الرحال. What is rihal? Plural of what? Rahal. And what is rahal? Yeah, it could be that, yes. It could be that. It could be the animal on which we ride. But لا تشد الرحال, or it could also mean? No? No? Travel. No, I mean rahl, the word rahl. It means also the saddle, thing that you put on your mount. لا تشد الرحال mean the saddles are not tied, which is a metaphor for what? For safar, for traveling. لا تشد الرحال. You know, the mounts are not prepared especially, the saddles are not tightened, which indicate metaphorically that the person is going to take a serious journey, a travel. To say, instead of to say لا يسافر إلا إلى, it says, there should not be a specific journey to. It says لا تشد الرحال. We do not tighten the saddles of mounts except to 3 masajid. Except to 3 masajid, 3 mosques, 3 masajid. Al-Masjid Al-Haram, the holy masjid in Mecca, that is. And Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, where? In Al-Quds, in Jerusalem. And Masjidi Hada, this masjid of mine, which is where? In Al-Medina. Now this is a text. What does this text mean? This is Sunnah. They all agree to that Sunnah. Now, whose understanding I'm going to take? Now, the understanding of the likes of the names I mentioned, or the understanding of someone relative to those is an iota. Or even if he were an expert relative to thousands of experts, statistically, What is rationally right? Who is rationally right statistically? Thousands of experts, let's say, or hundreds, or even tens, let alone thousands, relative to one expert. And sometimes that's what it is. But someone who learns it from one expert, for example, and that's all one learns, especially when young, early on, then knows only that and sees only that and was consumed by only that and does not see or understand anything else and does not even know of the existence of tens or dozens or hundreds or thousands. To the extent that even sometimes, depending on one's IQ, does not see that statistically and rationally, after you take into account all the concerns, it is always more rational and more logical and safer to follow, a bunch of experts than the opinion of one expert. Now, in this text, Al-Imam, for example, Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala. Al-Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala. And his opinions after that has pervaded throughout the centuries in some circles. Rahimahullah ta'ala. He has said that this text, and he says this text teaches that it is haram to travel to visit specifically the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. What is the evidence? The evidence, he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, لا تشد الرحال إلا إلى ثلاثة مساجد. And he mentions the text. Some of you have heard this, have read this. What do you think? We have only about 5 minutes left or 4 minutes left before we pray, inshallah. What do you think? Should I stop here and continue next week? And leave you in suspense? But then you do research and then you come more equipped? Which one do you want? Or give you an answer in 3 minutes and then we continue next time? Oh, you are. You don't want to work hard, huh? The answer in 3 minutes approximately is this. Well, he said that, rahimahullah ta'ala. He said, you see, it says you cannot initiate a travel, a journey to any place except to these 3 masajid. If not, you cannot do that. Right? That's what the text teaches, right? Right? Well, the answer is the overwhelming scholars, all of them before his time, rahimahullah ta'ala. From my knowledge, from the reports of the ulama, from my research, from the reports of the ulama who said that these great experts, that nobody said that before that time in understanding that text in that way. Nobody. Let's call it ijma'. It's consensus, number one. Number two, if it were that understanding, and many did not pay attention to this, many perhaps did not even read critically and specifically the details of the words of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala in elaborating on this, and that was his opinion. But an opinion that was, first of all, unique, and that was in contradistinction to the consensus of the ulama before when properly analyzed that history. Because if that text is to be understood that way, we should not go to any place through a travel except to these 3 masajid. That means we cannot go on a journey anywhere else except to these 3 masajid. That's when if you understand the text that way, لا تشد الرحال إلا. We should not initiate a travel except to these 3 masajid. Well, we should not initiate a travel. So, to go to India for business, I cannot do that. To go to Afghanistan to visit my parents, you cannot do that. To go to the United States to work or to study, you cannot do that. To go visit your parents who happen to live abroad on a specific journey, you cannot do that. To go study Sharia in Saudi or in Morocco or in South Africa or in Jordan, or you cannot do that because these are not the three masajid. And therefore, the way it was understood is wrong. Because by ijma', by consensus, all of these travels, these asfar, are lawful, and some of them mustahab even. What must have been meant, and we leave that to the next time, inshallah ta'ala, to continue. What must have been meant is one of the possible meanings, and it has to do with the logic of the language. Al-istithna', هذا استثناء مفرغ. Because it says لا تشد الرحال إلا إلى ثلاثة مساجد. We cannot initiate a journey except to 3 masajid. 1, 2, 3. It must have been intended, and there is a logic behind that in the language. It must have been intended. We cannot initiate a travel to any masjid, for specifically being in ibadah in that masjid, except to these 3 masajid. And there is, as I said, a logic pertaining to the rule of istithna. You know, the rule of exception and the logic of it in the Arabic language, etc. Where all of the ulama have argued this way. And Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala could not see that. Assuming he was an expert rahimahullah ta'ala, and in some ways he was, and the others are hundreds of experts we're talking about, all before him, and in his time those who have also responded to him, the ulama of his time, like the great Taqiyuddin al-Subki rahimahullah ta'ala, Shaykh al-Mashayikh, Qadi al-Qudat, Shaykh al-Islam, Taqiyuddin al-Subki rahimahullah ta'ala answered that. His own students like Imam al-Dhahabi rahimahullah ta'ala, for example, have all disagreed with that. As I said, next time we'll continue, but this is an example of, well, it is in the Qur'an or in the Sunnah, but how is it understood? And who understands? I take the understanding of the experts or the understanding of the educated Muslim? The opinion of the experts or the opinion of a contemporary doctoral, alhamdulillah, graduate of an Islamic institution? Which one weighs more logically? It's not about Qur'an and Sunnah. It's about who is dealing with this Qur'an and this Sunnah. The expert or the student? The experts or one expert or 2 experts? It is never in our history of ilm, when we have a scholarly opinion of the experts, it is never outside of the realm of the Qur'an and the Sunnah. Never. Never. It is on the basis of what they know of the Qur'an and the Sunnah, and of all the sources of knowledge and their scholarly aptitude to analyze the Qur'an and Sunnah and to come up with conclusions. Inshallah ta'ala, next time, next Tuesday, bi-idhnillah, we'll we'll continue from this point and remind me where we left off. And I would like you to remember that and to summarize that for yourselves. And I'll ask some of you, if you are here early on, alhamdulillah, early enough, I will ask one or two to give me a summary of what we covered here tonight, inshallah ta'ala. And from that point of view, we continue on the subject. بإذن الله تعالى وصلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.